Welcome everyone to the Liverpool Libraries. What I understand is their second video of this COVID-19 time. Cindy Hibbert was going to be on the call. I'm not sure where she is, but that is my Ann Messenger welcome on behalf of Cindy Hibbert at the Liverpool Library. I am with the Central New York Lyme and Tick-Borne Disease Alliance. We are here tonight for about an hour to listen to Brian Leydet, who is an assistant professor at SUNY ESF, SUNY's College of Environmental Science and Forestry. I'm delighted that you're in the room. I am going to be taking notes while Brian speaks. We are recording this, and the recording will be uploaded to our social media platforms and our website by the end of tomorrow, I believe. So you can share it with people, your friends and family. Also, I'm going to mute everyone so Brian can speak without being interrupted by audio. When he is done, we'll have time to ask questions, make comments, and so on, and you're perfectly able to unmute yourself. If you have a question, we're going to ask you to type your question in the chat room, or if you'd like, you can click on participants, and at the bottom of the box with participants, you'll see you can click on raise your hand. Feel free to do that. I hope I'm good at spotting the raised hands. Or you can just do this. Give us a wave and we will call on you. Okay, my pleasure to turn this over to the brilliant and fun and engaging Brian Leydet. Go, Brian.
All right, thank you, Anne. Let me get my screen up here. Hopefully everybody can see this. So thanks for having me. It's going to be an intimate session, but you know, technology and how it is. It's great. We can get some good questions and I can be personable and answer these things. So today, like Ann said, I'm an assistant professor at ESF and I'm a board member at the Central New York Lyme and Tick-Borne Disease Alliance. And today I'm going to talk to you about ticks and their diseases. Just to show you, ticks vary in their shape, size, color, everything. There's about 80 tick species in the United States and about 200 species worldwide. You can see in this picture, you have different life stages of ticks. On the bottom are the larval ticks. These are the baby ticks. Next are the teen ticks. These are the nymphal ticks. And then you have adults. And then up top, you have the ticks that have blood fed as adults. So they get in very different shapes and sizes, and it really takes an expert to tell them apart. But when we think about New York State, and especially Syracuse, we're going to talk mainly about two ticks, and mostly about one of these two ticks. So on the left is the black-legged tick, aka the deer tick. This is the tick you're most likely to get bit by out in New York State and central New York. The adult stages are active right now, so if you go out and get a tick on you, you'll likely have this female black-legged tick on you. However, there is another tick species you can get bit by, and this is the American dog tick. The American dog tick's a little bigger than the black-legged tick. It looks different based on its ornamentation or its design on its back. But when you get to the immature stages, the larva and the nymph, they're indistinguishable by the naked eye. It really takes an expert to tell them apart. Ticks seek out their prey in a couple different ways. The ticks in upstate New York use this strategy, the ambush strategy. This is a female tick on a grass leaf or a twig. And what she's doing is waiting for a host to pass by or an animal. She raises her front legs up, which have sensory organs, and basically grabs on with some hooks and then climbs up and finds a nice good spot to feed. There's another strategy ticks take to find their prey, and that is the hunter strategy. And here you have what we know as a Lone Star tick, a tick that's not established in upstate New York, but is established in downstate New York. And this tick will actually seek out its prey and chase its prey down up to 3 meters. So it actually runs after, grabs onto the feet, and then climbs up and finds a nice place to feed. What are they searching? Well, they're searching a couple different things. They look for odorants and CO2. So animal breath, animals release CO2 in their breath, and ticks can sense this. They can also smell, quote unquote, ammonia or butyric or lactic acid, which is expressed by sweating. On the bottom here, I have a dead deer carcass, and some ticks actually employ the strategy of seeking down rotting flesh, especially deer rotting flesh, not to feed on the deer because obviously it's dead, but to wait for scavengers to come by and attach to those scavengers, so coyotes or other foxes or other scavengers. So very, very smart little bugs, not bugs, but spiders. They can also detect heat. So looking at an organism, a radiant heat, a warm-blooded organism compared to the background, which the environment is colder, so they'll detect heat as you pass by. They also detect vibrations. So as an animal moves, they can sense vibrations on the earth. And I know we don't have many, elephants here in upstate New York, but this was the best vibration picture I could find. However, elephants are not safe from ticks, and this is the elephant tick. It's an amblyoma species tick. You can see it's got some dots on its back, but even elephants have their own ticks. So basically no one's safe on this earth. Some ticks actually respond to specific sounds of their hosts, their preferential hosts, including the feeding of cattle, so the chewing of grass and the oscillation of their muscles or their masseters, and even barking dogs. Some of the dog ticks can actually respond to the bark of a dog and will move in that direction. Lastly, ticks emit pheromones or tick cologne or tick perfume. Here you have an example of an aggregate or a group of larval ticks on the edge of a stick. And basically all these little ticks are emitting this pheromone to say, everybody come here and hang out. We're all gonna wait for the next host to pass by. So, each different life stage does this, and it's a very interesting phenomena. So why are we talking about ticks? Well, I hear all the time in upstate New York, especially in Syracuse, that ticks weren't a problem 10 years ago. Well, that's changed. Ticks have increased in numbers, and there's a couple of different reasons why. And it's not just in upstate New York, but it's around the East Coast, all around the globe, actually. But when we think about the East Coast or the Northeast, we had a really good control of ticks back in the 1900s, and probably many of you don't remember the early 1900s. But basically, humans almost eliminated deer populations across North America. And this is a graph showing the total deer populations. And deer are really important for ticks, especially the black-legged tick. The deer is one of the essential adult hosts for the black-legged ticks. And when you eliminate the adult host, you basically tank a tick population. Not only did we almost eliminate the adult host, but after Jamestown settlement by the British in the 1600s, we basically eliminated the tick environment, the forest. We deforested the Northeast, almost the whole eastern seaboard. And we did that for things like building materials and fuel. We realized both killing deer in those large amounts and deforesting was not a good thing. And you can see deer populations have really rebounded in the last century. And even forests have gained a stronghold in the eastern seaboard of the Northeast. However, these forests are not what we consider virgin forests, these very large swaths of forest. Many of us have never seen a forest this large unless you go up into the Adirondacks or out into the west coast of the United States. Our forests today look like fragmented habitats. It's green space, it's great, but it supports a very different mammal community than a virgin forest. And these fragmented plots are really good communities for deer, the host for the adult tick, and mice, the host for the immature tick. Mice are also the main reservoir for the Lyme disease bacterium. These fragments also put us in contact with the edges of the forest, which increases our risk for contacting a tick. It's not only things we've done in the landscape, but climate change. And here I show you a climate zone map of the United States. Each of these zones basically tells you what you can or can't plant in your garden or in your yard. And I tell people in upstate New York, there's a reason we can't have palm trees, banana trees, and orange trees. It's because we don't have the right amount of growing degree days. And that's something gardeners look at to what they can and can't plant in their zone. Ticks are almost the same way. Ticks have a very complex life cycle. It's about 2 years long, and they require certain environmental conditions because the majority of their life is spent off the host. 95% of their life is spent in the environment, on the ground, under the leaf litter, exposed to every element your tomato plant, your orange tree, your apple tree is exposed to. And as global climate change occurs, we see more and more increasing in habitat suitability for this tick. The ability for the tick to get from the larval stage all the way to the fed female stage. Interestingly, some studies up in Canada have shown that ticks actually have increased their range about 28 miles a year. So, this is actually a quantifiable movement we can actually look at. So it's really interesting to see what humans have done to ourselves. I always get asked, where do ticks live? And this is specific mainly to the black-legged tick, because certain ticks, I mean, there's 200 ticks, they all have different environments. Obviously, the elephant tick lives in a very different environment than the black-legged tick. But we'll talk about the ticks in central New York. And ticks really like dense forest, deciduous cover forest that has this really great leaf litter. And this leaf litter is great because what it does is it produces this environment on the ground where ticks live that is warm because of the decaying leaf matter, that is covered from the elements because ticks hate the sun, hate the heat. They're very prone to drying out, and they can retreat down into the soil and be very happy. And then when the conditions are right, they can climb up, find a twig, find a branch, a small stick to find a host to grab onto. But that's not where you always encounter ticks, because not all of us are tromping out into the wild forest where there's no paths, where there's no lawn. Very few of us are actually doing that. So where do you encounter ticks? So tick-borne diseases are kind of a marriage between where the ticks are and where humans habitate. You can imagine if you have a plot of land with thousands of ticks and they're all infected, but a human never steps foot in there, there's no disease, right? No one cares. However, we encounter ticks where we habitate, where we go the most, and that is trail edges. You see a trail here. You're going to encounter ticks on the edges of this trail. But in New York, humans most often encounter ticks on the edges of their lawn. These are called ecotones, a transition between two different environments, your lawn edge and a forest. Ticks are not very happy living in your mowed lawn. They can live there, but not as long as they can in cover. So when you're hanging out, weed eating, mowing, running after a ball your son kicked, this is where you're most likely to encounter a tick. Indeed, studies show that about 70% of New York residents experience a tick bite in their own yards. So the majority of people in New York are getting a tick in their own yard. Not to say you won't get a tick out in Green Lakes, because you definitely will, but you spend more time in your yard than you do in Green Lakes. So I always get asked about tick survival. In ideal conditions, ticks are pretty resilient. They can live up to 2 years. I kind of compare the tick to a lawnmower. The thing about a tick is that it only takes 3 meals. So it only feeds on blood 3 times, as the larva, as the nymph, and the adult. Like, think about your lawnmower. If you only filled your lawnmower 3 times in its life, you would really use it sparingly, because after the 3rd time, you got to throw your lawnmower away and pay and buy another one. Ticks have to really be sparingly, and when they can quest, when they can move, because they don't have an infinite amount of energy. They only have that 1 blood meal until they find that next one. So they have to be very cautious of when they use that their energy. In the winter, I always get asked, because Syracuse has some mild winters, some severe winters. Severe winters are actually okay for ticks. Ticks like to live in what I call tick igloos. Ticks are under that brush, under that soil layer, under that decaying leaf matter. And it's a very different climate. We call them microclimate. It's very different than what we experience when we are above the snow. It might be very cold for these folks that are making a campsite. I don't know why they're camping in the snow like this. They're not going to worry about ticks. There's no ticks out here. However, when snow melts and there's bare exposed ground, this is an environment where ticks can become active. So it's not just the absolute temperature, but it's multiple factors. What do ticks feed on? Ticks feed on a variety of hosts. Some ticks are very host specific. The black-legged tick, the tick we're most concerned about in upstate New York, is a host generalist, and it feeds on all different types of things. And I put up a variety of hosts here. The immature ticks, the larva and the nymphs, the baby and the teen, like to feed on things like chipmunks, mice, shrews, and voles. Here is a song sparrow. Actually, we caught in a study, and you can see there's about 36 ticks on this song sparrow. So here's a good example of a tick right here feeding around the eye. Then the adult ticks really require larger hosts. So they require deer, fox, dogs, coyotes. You won't find an adult tick on a chipmunk or a mouse or a vole or a shrew. I also note here that deer don't carry Lyme disease, the actual pathogen. The deer blood itself kills the pathogen as soon as it enters the body. So the deer itself is really important for the adult tick. The adult tick has to lay eggs, and those eggs then feed on the smaller organisms. If you don't have the large animals, if you had an environment full of mice, you would not have a tick problem. All right, let's talk about the tick itself. So the tick has multiple different life stages. Here is the egg stage. This is an adult female tick laying eggs. It depends on the species, but black-legged ticks lay about 1,000 to 3,000 eggs. So every female will lay about 1,000 to 3,000 eggs. Those eggs will then hatch into larvae. Larvae are very small. You can see them on the side of a penny here. They're about the size of a 0 on a penny. It's important to note they're not infected with Lyme disease, even if the female, the adult, was infected. They can transmit other organisms, but not Lyme disease, and that's our biggest concern here in upstate New York. Larvae hang out together because they're laid in the same space, and they usually aggregate together on leaves and other things. So when you find one larva, you usually find 10, 15, 20, 100 more. Once they take a blood meal, they then molt into the nymphal stage. The nymphal stage is the life stage most implicated in Lyme disease transmission because it's very small. It's not as small as the larva, but it's much smaller than the adult. And this is the first stage that can be infected. If the larva took a blood meal on an infected animal, then the nymph can have the disease and can transmit it to you. They're very hard to detect because of their size. This is a nymphal tick compared to an adult tick. And I'll show you a really good example next. You may have seen this on social media. This is something the CDC kind of released about poppy seed muffin. I love poppy seed muffins. I wish I would have thought of this because this was a great marketing scheme. The CDC released this maybe 3 years ago and said, spot the 5 ticks. There are 5 ticks on this poppy seed muffin. And we'll zoom in for folks here. These are the 5 ticks. Here's a really good one right here. But these are the 5 ticks on that muffin. You can see them right here. So you got 5 ticks. They're very small. You can imagine that one of these can feed on you and you may never notice it. Also, don't buy poppy seed muffins at the CDC. All right, once the nymph feeds, it can then molt into an adult. The adults really require larger animals. Deer are one of the most important hosts for the adult ticks. And deer can feed a lot of adult ticks, and those adult ticks can lay a lot of eggs and hatch a lot of larvae. Adult ticks can look very different depending on what stage they are in the feeding process. So adult ticks, this is an unfed female. They can take about 5 to 7 days to feed. And the majority of the feeding happens in the last 2 days. So this is a female that's fed about 2 to 3 days. This is about 3 to 4 days. And here's 4, here's 5 to 6 days. So on the last couple days, they take what we call the big sip. Obviously at this stage, they're very noticeable on you. They're about the size of a grape. Right around here, they're usually not noticeable. And I see a lot of people taking ticks off and around this stage when they're on their body. But many people will find ticks this size on their dogs. All right, so there's ticks out there. You need to prevent being bit. Prevention is the key because if you don't get bit, you can't get disease. So let's talk about a little bit about prevention. So one thing we really stress is wearing proper clothing. This is not proper clothing for ticks. This is a female that's collecting ticks in an improper way, wearing short sleeves, just terrible. I don't know why anybody would ever send them out to do this. I think this is a Cornell person. So this is what my students do when they go out and collect ticks, or myself. We wear full white garments with gloves, everything to the tens. And I don't expect the public to do this. I don't expect you to do this because when we're out there like this, we get a lot of questions. And it's fun to answer some of them. But what you can do when you're out there is to wear long sleeves and pants, to wear light colored clothing, to tuck your pants into your socks. And why do you do that? Well, I told you earlier that the majority of ticks in upstate New York and anywhere really attach to the lower extremities. They grab on your shoes, on your lower legs, on your socks. When you find ticks on your hairline or on your chest or on your back, they've climbed all the way up there. So they've had time to climb up on you. Therefore, if you tuck your pants into your socks, they have to climb on the outside of your clothes. You're more likely to notice them. If your pants are not tucked into your socks, they hide under your pants, they climb up, and they have free reign over your body. Light colored clothes make them easy to spot. If you spot the tick, you take them off, you throw them away, you don't worry about it. Next thing you can do is use a personal acaricide or a bug spray. I highly recommend permethrin. Permethrin is a spray used only for your gear, not on your skin. You can use it in your clothes. I use this on my shoes, my lawn shoes when I'm out there. You really want to follow the application directions on the back of the can because this is highly toxic to cats when it comes right out of the can. But once it dries on your clothing or on your shoes, it can get wet again and it's not toxic at all. It can actually last a couple cycles through the wash. If your shoes get wet a couple times, no need to reapply, but you do want to reapply every once in a while. This permethrin works really great. It actually kills the tick if it comes in contact with it. And it's like I said, I use it on my shoes. I use it on my child's shoes, and we do stay tick free. Next thing, if you don't want to use something on your clothes, you want to use your skin, we recommend things like a DEET or a picaridin-based spray. Here are two examples. You want to find DEET or picaridin sprays that are at least 20%. These are safe for the skin and they'll repel ticks as well as other biting insects like mosquitoes. I provide a link here to the EPA's website where they have a recommended repellent for you based on how long you're going to be outside, what ingredients you want or don't want, and what insects you want to repel. We have a link to this on our website, and I'll provide that address later on as well. And then lastly, when you come inside, even if you do all these things, you need to perform a tick check because ticks are resilient little spiders. They've been around a lot longer than us. They were feeding on dinosaurs. So they've learned to live. So when you come inside, you need to look at areas where ticks feed, the back of your knees, your groin, armpits, your back, your chest, basically everywhere. If you take a shower shortly after returning inside, you can wash off ticks that haven't attached. If the tick is actually attached, it's not coming out easy. It's got mouth parts that have barbs like a fish hook, and it's staying in there. They also release a cement that actually cements them to your skin. Last thing you can do is take your clothes that you are working in, put them in the dryer for about 15 to 20 minutes, and that'll kill any ticks that have not attached to you. So it's a very safe thing to do. All right, so when we're thinking around the house, what may increase your risk of a tick bite and Lyme disease? And I pulled this from some research, but if you live within proximity of woods, so 100 feet within woods, you are more likely to get a tick bite or get Lyme disease. If you have yard or land around your house, obviously, if you're living in downtown Manhattan, you're less likely than if you're living, in Fayetteville, New York. If you have woods on your plot versus just an open plot, you're more likely to be exposed to tick bites. And if you're using those woods for playing, for hiking, gardening, you're again more likely to be exposed to ticks. But other things you don't think about often is if you have a wood pile, which a lot of people do in upstate New York because we like our wood burning stoves, you're more likely to be exposed to ticks. This is a great habitat for rodents, and rodents like to hang out here, and rodents are a great host for ticks. As well as stone walls. Stone walls are a great place for rodents. There's many stone walls up here, and this will increase your risk of tick bite and potentially tick-borne disease. If you leave feed for small mammals or birds, so I hate to tell people, but feeding small birds will actually could increase your risk for tick bite and Lyme disease because birds and the mice that feed on those seeds do carry those organisms. So, you don't have to get rid of all your bird feeders, but you do need to you need to recognize this is an increased risk. And if you do spot deer and mice in your yard, you need to recognize you're at increased risk for Lyme and tick-borne diseases. And if you live in upstate New York, this is not an uncommon sight. As well as spending time outdoors. So if you spend more than 5 hours a week doing yard work, which I hope in the next week most of us are doing because this is probably the best weather we've had so far. And then, interestingly enough, if you have an increased risk with the number of unpowered hand tools you own. So this is a good example of a garden shed. This looks like this person's probably at high risk because that's a lot of unpowered hand tools, and they're spending a lot of time in the yard. All right, so I've told you what is bad. What can you do around your home to prevent ticks and tick-borne diseases? You can create these no-go zones. No-go zones are areas where you're likely to be exposed to ticks, and those are those areas on the edge of the forest. And to create those no-go zones, you can actually put off wood chip or rock barriers, so you can visually see these no-go zones. You can define these to your family, to your loved ones, and say, look, we don't go here, we don't go there because of tick-borne diseases. You can keep your wood piles away from the house. Put them on that wood chip barrier that defines that no-go zone, or that rock barrier that defines that no-go zone. And that keeps those mice away from the areas that you frequent more often. If you have grandchildren or children, you place their play sets in sunny areas far away from those no-go zones, because you don't want your kids getting bit by ticks, and the places they're hanging out, the swing set, you want to make that an area that's as safe as possible. Now again, your yard is not impermeable to these ticks, so you always still need to be using precaution and doing tick checks. Removing any leaf litter is really good. So in the fall, you need to remove that really quickly because that's a good place for ticks to live. Creating these open, sunny areas by pruning trees. Anytime you let in more sunlight and heat, you will kill ticks or let them, not survive as long. Keeping your lawns mowed and trimming your shrubs next to your walkways or your patios will decrease those tick-friendly environments. You can surround gardens with stone or gravel or sunny lawn paths. Hardscape is really good because ticks are not going to live on hardscape. So these are good recommendations to decrease tick zones in your yard. And then ultimately keeping deer out is really important, especially in upstate New York. You can use deer fencing. However, the fencing must be at least 7.5 foot high for your max protection. Deer can actually jump 8 feet high. However, they don't like jumping 8 feet, they're max. So 7.5 is recommended for max protection. You can use deer-resistant plants for your landscape. I know my wife and I are doing some re-landscaping, and we're selecting all deer-resistant plants because we get heavy deer browse here. We want to keep them out of our yard. And then removing any exotic invasive species. So things like Japanese barberry, it was a very popular plant a couple decades ago, but it's invasive. It's heavy deer browsed, and it makes a really good environment for the tick to live. And then honeysuckle, they may look pretty, they may smell pretty, but deer like them and ticks live in them. So you can remove that, and that will really help protect your yard. All right, so I sometimes get questions about other control methods. So what about commercial control methods? And one of the most popular ones here in upstate New York are what are called tick tubes, and you've probably heard of these. There are commercial tubes available, fairly pricey in my opinion. There's also online webinars of how to make your own, dangerous in my opinion. How do they function is basically you take permethrin, you impregnate this cotton. Mice take cotton to make their nests, and here you have a couple mouse pups in their nest. And basically, if that cotton is impregnated with permethrin, then there's no ticks. You'll kill the ticks on the mouse and all the mice. Theoretically, great. It makes sense. Ecologically, probably won't work, mainly because I don't know anywhere where there's just mice out in your yard and there's not chipmunks, squirrel, voles, birds, deer. And these are all other hosts for the ticks that don't use cotton. So studies have shown that in real life applications, these really don't work. They don't decrease your risk for Lyme disease. And they cost you money. So there's better, cheaper alternatives like self-protection than these tick tubes. I often also get asked about commercial control measures. So lawn spraying, there's do-it-yourself lawn sprays like this person is doing here. I don't recommend using a lawn spray when your dog is actually playing in your yard. So this is probably just a cut image. That's dangerous to your dog. There's also commercial people that'll come out and spray your yard with high-powered gas sprayers, high-powered fluid sprayers, or low-powered pump-back sprayers. Many of these synthetic sprays are scientifically proven to be very effective and will definitely kill ticks in your yard and knock down ticks. But I work at ESF. We are a college focused on the environment. And I have to let you know that there are caveats to this. And that is that all of these sprays are not tick specific in that they'll also kill bees. They'll kill butterflies. They'll kill your positive organisms that you want around your yard. Some of them actually required specialized equipment, which are expensive for regular people to get. You may need to hire someone. They may require licensures to buy and actually to put out. Most of these require multiple applications at certain times of the year in certain areas. So it really takes an expert to give you advice and to apply. There are purported safer or natural sprays, essential oils, those types of things, and they do work to some degree scientifically, but they degrade much quicker than synthetic sprays, and they have to be reapplied more often. So if that's an option, it may be a really good option for you and your family. All of these sprays are highly aquatic toxic, even the more natural sprays, and there are certain laws about spraying them near water bodies. So again, that's why you shouldn't be doing this at home unless you kind of know what you're doing. And there are laws against it. All right, so now let's talk about the diseases. So there are a few tick-borne diseases in New York State. Here's a list, not all inclusive, but I tried to pull as many as I could. You've got Lyme disease, you've got Borrelia miyamotoi disease, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, Powassan virus, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, tularemia, ehrlichiosis, Heartland virus, bourbon virus, red meat allergy. These diseases highlighted in red are all spread by the black-legged tick, the most common tick to bite us in upstate New York. So, you don't have to worry about one disease, you have to worry about a few. However, there's more than just that. So there's other ticks that can spread disease, and there's things that we need to be aware about. So what does a tick-borne disease look like? Well, I can basically tell you that if you get a tick-borne disease, you're going to start out with these symptoms. You're going to have fever, you're going to be weak, you're going to have pain, you're going to be tired, headache. You may have confusion, chills associated with the fever, and some of the diseases are associated with nausea and vomiting. So basically, you feel like you have the flu. But it's not flu season. It's not flu season right now. If you get bit by a tick and you start showing these symptoms, maybe COVID-19, be concerned. Probably won't be the flu, could be a tick-borne disease. So very vague, which is not helpful. But we need to think about exposure and developing these types of symptoms when you shouldn't be having them. So just to show you the problem we're having in upstate New York or in New York in general, this is Lyme disease, the most common tick-borne disease in all of the Northern Hemisphere, but definitely the most common tick-borne disease in New York. And these are the rates per 100,000 people. And I've shown you bar graphs for each region of New York State and the rates. And you can see in downstate New York, where we really have historically been considered heavy tick presence, heavy Lyme disease, they're actually seeing decreases in the prevalence of Lyme disease. However, out in Western and Northern New York, we're seeing heavy increases in Lyme disease. And when I put a number to this, you're going to see this is a % change in the last decade. Downstate New York has seen 15, 39, 31, even the capital region has seen a 56% decrease in cases in the past 10 years. Out here in central New York, we've seen almost a 450% increase in cases. Southern Tier has got an 800% increase. Western New York, has got a 970% increase. So this is a problem, and it's a problem that's not going to stop. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Lyme disease because this is the most common disease. The clinical disease itself is different for everyone, but there are some generalized symptoms that I'll talk about. The early stage of the disease really can be characterized in a few different ways. General flu-like illness, you're going to have that. Some people develop a skin rash known as an erythema migrans. It's often called a bullseye rash, but I caution people to say it doesn't often show as a bullseye like you see here. It can show up as just a red rash or a red-blue rash or a blistering lesion or multiple rashes. This rash usually develops 7 days after a tick bite. You may never notice it though, because it may be on your shoulder blade, maybe behind your knee, maybe on your head. What I tell people is that the name erythema migrans stands for a red expanding rash. There's no central clearing, there's no bullseye, there's no blister in that name. So if you do get a tick bite and you develop a red rash, I tell people take a Sharpie to draw the edges of your rash. If you wake up the next day and your red rash is expanded beyond that edge, you have an erythema migrans, you need to go to the doctors, you need to get doxycycline. My good friend, Dr. Chris Polino, calls that a doxycycline deficiency. If left untreated, Lyme disease can get bad, as can many other tick-borne diseases. It can develop into disseminated disease. The most common clinical presentation of Lyme disease, disseminated Lyme disease in North America, is arthritis. And that occurs in about 60% of patients. Sorry for my child. This is telecommuting, teleworking. I've done many news interviews, and I'm sure my kid's yelling in the background, but that's fine. So you'll develop arthritis in a major joint, usually a knee, an elbow, a hip. The hip you can't see as well, but you may have aching in the hip. If still you don't go to the doctor and you're still left untreated, you can really have some very severe clinical disease. Beyond the major joint arthritis, there are cardiac complications associated with Lyme disease, including a very severe fatal condition known as third-degree heart block that can drop a healthy person dead in a second. There's also neurological conditions such as Bell's palsy, which this woman is showing here. It looks like a stroke. It's basically facial paralysis, and it's temporary. And then meningitis, which is swelling of the brain, of the meninges, which is the protective barrier of the brain. So Lyme disease is not just this general flu-like problem, but it can develop severe, and it can actually kill you. So let's talk a little bit about diagnosis of Lyme disease. It's early disease, when you want to be treated, is very difficult to diagnose, and I do not envy my doctor friends. It's based on clinical signs, which can vary between people. It's general flu-like illness, may or may not have a rash. It's very hard to tell if somebody may or may not have Lyme disease, and treatment is essential, especially early on. One really important key is this history of a tick bite or being in a tick endemic area. And you as a patient knowing that, or having the tick to show the doctor, that can really help a doctor make a guess at a diagnosis and get you treated early. There is serological testing, and I'll tell you right now, it's not the greatest. It is an antibody test, meaning that it's indirect. It doesn't detect the actual organism in you. It detects your ability to respond to that organism, to produce antibodies. And we all know all of us are different in our ability to fight off disease, to get sick, to not get sick. And this can vary between people. And this takes time to develop. Actually, with the test itself, in the first week of illness, only 9% of people with very strong active immune systems are actually going to test positive with this. So you really need to be on top of flu-like symptoms. Hey, I was gardening 7 days ago. I got flu-like symptoms. Probably had ticks on me, or I found a tick on my clothes and I took it off. You may have gotten bitten. Give that to your doctor. Hopefully the doctor will get you your doxycycline and get you treated. All right, let's say you do get a tick on you. What do? I tell people to take a fine pair of tweezers, grasp the tick at the base of your skin, and pull straight out. I've removed thousands of ticks from animals, and this works every single time. Sometimes you may have the head stay in. This is usually just the mouth parts, and that's okay. You don't need to be digging at it with a toothpick or a needle. Your body will kick that out. You can take some Neosporin. You can wash it with some alcohol. You can put some hydrogen peroxide on it. You'll be okay. But it's important to get that tick out as soon as you see it. Don't take that tick and burn it with a match or throw it away or flush it down your toilet. Take that tick, put it in a Ziploc bag, and throw it in your freezer. And I tell people to do that because, well, the freezer will kill your tick. But if you develop symptoms, you can bring that tick with you to your doctor and say, look, doc, I got flu-like symptoms and I found this tick on me. I think it's tick-borne disease. And that may help your doctor treat you correctly. If you are in New York State, there's another option for you. And that is you can mail the tick to the Thangamani lab. And that's a colleague over at Upstate Medical College. Dr. Saravanan Thangamani does free tick testing. And he'll test your tick for 7 different pathogens. You'll get a specific ID number for your tick and for you. And you can actually look and say, what did that tick have? It bit me. Am I feeling sick? Now, I have to tell you, all labs right now are shut down because of the COVID pandemic. But you can go to his website, follow up, and when they come back up and running, you can send your ticks into them. However, don't wait for your results to come back. If you feel sick, you still need to go to your doctor and to get tested, to get treated, because delay is not a good thing for tick-borne diseases. You can also visit our website at our Lyme Alliance, cnylymealliance.org. We have a lot of additional information, including things like the EPA repellent selector and other things for you. And this is all information that's been vetted by myself, my colleagues, and other folks. So good information for people in the area. 45 minutes, right on time. Anybody have any questions? This is myself and my #1 helper, Lucas. We are picking 2 ticks off a flag in our backyard. So at this time, I'll take questions from the audience.
Great job, Brian. So a few questions have come in.
Sure.
From Kathy Coriel. Are these decreases a result more of the testing criteria changed versus actual slowing spread? The test criteria to get an official positive is more restrictive now. Friends with Lyme indicate this is misleading testing, if that's a factor in the data.
So, you know, as an epidemiologist, first of all, I take my data from the state health department website, which is a lot more reliable than the CDC for New York State, definitely. And I would say no. I would say what's probably causing that decline in downstate New York are probably 2 things. One is awareness down there. It's been there a long time, and people are practicing different awareness, or they're just afraid to go outside, which I hear a lot. Also, in downstate New York, we're seeing an increase in the Lone Star tick, and that's becoming more frequently biting people than the black-legged tick, and that tick doesn't transmit Lyme disease, so we may see a shift in disease. So I think it's a combination of both of those. The actual testing is a regimen that's common throughout New York, and if we were seeing a decrease in downstate, we would like to see a decrease in upstate as well. But I think it's a combination of awareness, scaredness, and a different tick. But good question.
I'll chime in here. Our executive director, Royale Scuderi, who couldn't be on this call tonight, sadly, has suffered from tick and Lyme and other tick-borne diseases for over 10 years, traveled over a year to Long Island to get treatment for one of those diseases, Babesia, and has family there also. Tells us that it's a way of life on the island. To protect, self-protection is a way of life now. It was so bad, everybody got it. Everybody there now pulls their socks over their pants, wears long rubber boots when they go outside gardening, has the tick spray, different bug sprays on their patios, in their garages, in their cars, and so on. And it's just to reinforce what Brian said, they're really, really into prevention. Something we want to emulate up here.
It's like we're in sunscreen down there. They do tick prevention like we wear sunscreen, and that's where we should be, but we're not in central New York because it's such a new thing for us.
Right. Brian, another question from Lonnie Recker. How effective is doxycycline? So
early, I would say very good. Early is the key. There are questions as to the later the treatment, what happens. There are animal studies that I will undoubtedly tell you that there are animals get treated and still have evidence of the bacteria. So in humans, it's a gray area. I think there's a continuum of medical doctors, there's a community of scientists that believe yes or no, and then there's a lot of us in the middle that are like, I don't know. There's not a conclusive yes or no on that, and that's something that we're still striving for. That's why I don't think anybody's going to disagree that early treatment, early recognition, early diagnosis is the key, period.
Right.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question. I know it's not the greatest answer, but it's what needs to happen.
Another question from Lonnie. We haven't seen the ticks becoming resistant to the permethrin, have we?
No, we haven't, because it's not used that much in the environment. If you were to spray permethrin in the environment, you would kill everything. And that's not a very good thing. People are very hesitant to use environmental sprays for ticks because they're so broad spectrum, unlike mosquito sprays, which they'll drop over Cicero Swamp if there's a a single positive mosquito for triple E, you know, let's go broadcast spray Cicero Swamp, or we got black flies, let's bomb this lake. It's a different attitude with ticks, which I don't know why, because 1 in 1,000 mosquitoes may have a disease, 1 in 2 ticks has a disease. I think we really need to spend more effort on researching targeted, you know, applications, whether they're pheromone disruption or targeted tick killers, but it's something that's just not funded. And, you know, we're doing things at ESF on the small scale, but we're trying to make a little bit of a wake there. But I think it's a highly needed research opportunity and realm to go down.
Right. Brian, the questions are still coming in. Can I grab the screen back from you for a moment? Because I want to put up, well, we have 10 minutes more. While we continue with questions, I'm going to share a screen with our information on it. If you want to get in touch with us or find our that's our website. These are our social media platforms. We have just added a YouTube channel where this will be recording will be posted. And our YouTube channel is just go onto YouTube and Google around for Central New York Lyme and Tick-Borne Alliance. You'll find us. So let me go back to the questions here, which I can't find. There was a long question and I can't get there. So would the person who asked the long question, yeah, great.
Yeah, okay.
I've got it, man.
Oh, good.
Let's see, I'm pulling the chat now. Okay, dust cycling. Okay, I got Lindsay Williams, talked about being diagnosed with chronic Lyme and Babesia in 2016. She's concerned with the response from doctors up here. Many of her friends have removed ticks from themselves and say doctors don't take them seriously, maybe prescribe 1 or 2 doses of doxycycline. How are doctors continue to learn about Lyme? That's a really good question, Lindsay. It's something that we as an alliance are trying to handle. And I know I've been around the doctors and talking to the doctors about, because doctors have a lot of things to do. They don't just study Lyme. That's all I do. That's all I do all day, study Lyme disease. I know all the literature, know everything about it. I've been doing it for 14 years. Doctors have COVID-19, have every other thing, Zika. And it's education and trusting. And when you have doctors trust scientists like myself, we can show them this information that maybe 1 or 2 doses doesn't work. Maybe you need to be open to other things. And there are doctors that are really opening up to that. We as an alliance have brought together doctors on both sides of the spectrum, the Lyme Disease Society as well as ILADS. And we're getting them in the same room talking, coming up with ideas to work together and to take people and bring them to the right place where they need to get to be treated and supported. So it's going to be a slow process. I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for your friends. Prevention is #1, but we're working slowly at it. And I hope to be a lot better than downstate was 10 or 15 years ago.
Was that Lindsay who asked the question, Brian?
It was.
So let me expand on Brian's answer. I 2 years ago was misdiagnosed with, I had Lyme disease, it turned out, but I was misdiagnosed by a doctor who thought I had sleep apnea because I must have yawned 20 times through just a standard annual physical. Sent me off to a sleep apnea lab, I didn't have it. Went to another doctor whose practice is not in infectious diseases, but she had become very familiar with Lyme disease because her 2 teenagers had been bitten and been affected terribly. Unbeknownst to me, she gave me a test, called me a week later and said, "You have, no wonder you're so tired." That was one of the symptoms I had. "You have Lyme." So fast forward now to Brian's earlier point, we want to do these kinds of sessions, not to the general public, but also with doctors. along with our educational plan rollout to general physicians, primary physicians, we also are educating the public in the way we're doing now, session by session, 15-member by 30-member session, to help people like me get smarter in what the symptoms are, how you can spot it, how you can prevent it, and how you can be in your doctor's face, which I have now been, and saying, no, I think I need to be tested for Lyme. So that's a long-winded answer, Lindsay. I too am sorry that you have been affected and your friends have been affected, but we all need to get smarter about it, including docs.
No doubt. Lindsay has a follow-up about equipping doctor's office to test the bacteria straight from the tick, like the labs. Lindsay, that's a very advanced test, and it's kind of like the first rollout of the COVID test. It has to go to specialized labs that have specialized people who know what they're doing, and it takes a while to get a result back. There's no quick down and dirty test to test out of a tick for the bacteria. There's also the fact that just because a tick has the bacteria doesn't mean it actually transmitted. So there's that really gray zone. Just because that tick's got that bacteria doesn't mean it actually injected it into you. Therefore, I really, and I was a paramedic, and I'll go back to my paramedic years. I was a paramedic for 10 years before I got into higher education and academia. And I used to train new EMTs and other paramedics, and a lot of them like to use machines to assess a patient. And, we put a pulse ox, which is something that measures your oxygen concentration in your blood. And an EMT would put it on the patient, be like, oh, Brian, the pulse ox is 80%. It should be 99. This person needs oxygen. They're having trouble breathing. And I'm looking at the patient. They're talking to me like a normal person. I'm like, I don't think the machine is right. So it takes more than just a machine to tell you something. It takes good clinical judgment and education to read a patient, to assess the symptoms, the risk factors, and then treat based on your knowledge. And I think because of the spread of disease has happened so quickly, we were really behind in educating physicians. And I'm hoping we can do this as Lyme experts, educate physicians to use this as a differential when they're talking to patients, especially here in upstate New York.
Yeah. Other questions, Brian, on that screen, which I can't see?
If anybody has it, raise their hand, speak up. If not, type it in. If not,
I'm scrolling through. I see no raised hands.
oh,
Rather than type, this is Will Connor. I wanted to say something. Your comment 1 in 2 should be a banner warning people about the potential that ticks provide, and to do something like, don't let it get to you. 1 in 2 is an amazing ratio.
yeah, and that's low. I mean, you can have some areas it's higher than that, 60%, 75%. So it's not something you want to mess with, and it's just it's a shame that some areas like downstate are like, well, ticks are here, we just got to deal with it. I mean, no, we don't. We can do something about it, and we really need to push forward with trying to slow the spread of the tick to getting to new areas, but also press this prevention, because it's been 30 years since Lyme disease was described, and yet we have a terrible diagnostic test, and treatment doesn't work. So when do we go back and say, let's go back to prevention and stop people from getting sick, so we don't have to worry about treatment, we don't have to worry about diagnostics? And that's my soapbox, because I'm not a medical physician and I don't research those other things.
You've done a very impressive job of presenting things.
Thank you, Will.
The one other area I would suggest is getting the DEC people to put that information in all of their publications, whether they're fishing or hunting or whatever they're out doing. DEC ought to be making their people aware.
I agreed. And at ESF, I'm in a good spot to help bring that to the forefront. And I will definitely as the Alliance grows, we'll definitely tie into our contacts at the DEC, which run deep from my college. But right now, the state's a little busy, as we all can imagine.
We understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We would love for you to visit our website to get smarter, to my earlier point. We would love for you to look at our social media platforms we have at least one post a day. Royale Scuderi, again, our executive director, is great at surfacing information about how to protect yourself, what sorts of things to look for, just keeping people up to date, including the whole board. This is we're all learning every single day. So like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, take a look at there were some powerful stories on our YouTube channel. Again, thank you so much. I see Cindy, finally, you came back. Thank you, Cindy, for hosting us at your second video session at the Liverpool Library. And have a good evening, everyone.
If I can just say, thank you so much for being here, Brian and Ann. This, of course, was a topic we were going to present in person at the library. So I'm very thankful that we have this technology so we can still offer this program. The library will be doing more programming this way. So check our Facebook page and maybe you'll see something else that you're interested in.
And we'll, I think in person.
I miss everybody. We all miss you. From the library staff. We hope that we will all be united again soon in person.
And we'll do it next year in person, Cindy.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.